My parents forged my signature to borrow a large sum of money, so I exposed the truth and watched their world completely collapse at trial. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and for the past few years, I've been living in a city a few hours away from my hometown. I moved out at 22 for work, and since then, I've built a decent life for myself, a stable job, a good group of friends, and, most importantly, independence. My relationship with my family has always been fine, but we were never the overly affectionate, talk-every-day kind of family. We check in now and then, meet up for the holidays, the usual. So when I suddenly got a call from my mom out of the blue, asking me to come back home, I knew something was off. She started the conversation normally, asking how I was, how work was going, and then, almost too casually, she said, "Your father and I have been thinking maybe it's time for you to move back home." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she wasn't. She said the family was going through a rough time and that it would mean a lot if I were there. That was strange as far as I knew. Nothing had been wrong the last time we spoke. I asked if someone was sick, if they were struggling financially, but she was quick to shut that down. "It's not about money," she insisted. "We just need you here." That didn't make sense. If it wasn't money and it wasn't health, then what was it? I asked for specifics, but she just sighed and said, "You'll understand when you're here." Before I could press further, my older brother called me. We weren't particularly close growing up, but we got along fine. He jumped straight to the point. "Mom and Dad need you here. It's selfish for you to ignore that." I asked him what was actually going on, and all he gave me was a vague, "Things aren't great, man. Just come back." Then he started going on about how I had abandoned the family when they needed me. That was ridiculous. I moved out years ago, like plenty of people do. It wasn't like I cut contact or anything. Then my younger sister messaged me. Unlike my brother, she and I were pretty close, but even she was guilt-tripping me. "You know how much Mom misses you, right?" she wrote. "She cries about it sometimes. I don't know how you can be okay with that." And that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, I started getting messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, relatives who had never cared to reach out before, aunts, uncles, cousins, all suddenly acting like we had the most amazing bond. They kept bringing up how family sticks together and how they were so excited at the thought of me being back home. The strangest part, a family friend even contacted me about a job in my hometown, saying he had an opportunity lined up for me if I moved back. That was too convenient. At this point, I knew something wasn't adding up. My family had never been this insistent before, and their sudden interest in my life felt unnatural. I decided to poke around a little. I called my sister and casually brought up that my lease wasn't up for another 6 months, just to see how she'd react. She hesitated before saying, "Oh, that's, not great timing." When I asked why, she suddenly had to go. That confirmed it. Something was going on, and they weren't telling me. The next morning, my mom called again, and I decided to test her too. I told her I wouldn't be able to move back until next year, thinking she'd let it go. Instead, her voice immediately changed. "So you just don't care about us?" she snapped. "After everything we've done for you?" That threw me off. This wasn't just some casual invitation anymore, this was full-blown manipulation. Then, later that day, my dad showed up at my apartment. No warning, no heads up, just drove 2 hours and knocked on my door like it was completely normal. When I opened it, he gave me a long look before saying, "We need to talk." He wasn't angry, but he wasn't exactly calm either. He kept saying I was being difficult and that I was overthinking everything. I asked him point blank what was going on. He sighed and said, "We just need the family together right now, that's all." That wasn't an answer, and when I told him I wasn't moving back, at least not anytime soon, he just shook his head and left without another word. After that, the calls increased. My mom started calling multiple times a day. My brother kept texting, and even my sister, who usually stayed out of things, was trying to convince me. It felt like they were closing in. Then, right when I was starting to feel overwhelmed, something even stranger happened. An old friend from high school, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, messaged me out of nowhere. He had seen a vague post I made on social media about family being weird lately. His message was short: "Whatever you do, don't move back. Trust me." That was it. No explanation, no context, just that. I replied, asking him what he meant, but he left me on read. At this point, I wasn't just suspicious, I was worried. What was going on in my family that had them acting like this, and why was someone from my past warning me to stay away? The messages didn't stop. Every morning, there was something new. Missed calls from my mother. Voicemails where she was either crying or speaking in a tone so soft it was almost eerie. My brother wasn't as dramatic, but his messages were relentless. He'd send short, passive-aggressive texts. Things like, "Guess family doesn't mean much to you anymore," or "Hope you don't regret this later." Even cousins and distant relatives, people who barely acknowledged my existence before, were suddenly sending guilt-ridden messages about how family sticks together and how things would be so much easier if I just came home. Then my cousin let something slip. We weren't particularly close, so it was strange when he messaged me. At first, it was the usual spiel about how my parents missed me and how moving back would be good for everyone. But then he casually mentioned, "Since they already made arrangements, it's not like it'll be hard for you." That stopped me in my tracks. Arrangements? What arrangements? I asked him what he meant, but he backpedaled fast, saying he was just assuming things. It was too late, though. He had confirmed my suspicion. My family wasn't just hoping I'd move back. They had already planned for it. I called my parents immediately. My father picked up, his tone calm but firm. I asked him directly what these arrangements were. He didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he brushed it off, saying they had simply prepared for the possibility of my return. When I pressed for details, he turned the conversation back to how things would be better if I were home. No specifics, no explanation, just the same vague insistence that I needed to be there. That wasn't enough for me. I started looking into things on my own. I checked property records on a hunch. It took a bit of digging, but I found something strange. My parents had recently refinanced their mortgage. That alone wasn't damning, but considering how insistent they were on me coming home, it felt off. Then my sister slipped up. She was still avoiding my questions, but in a conversation about something unrelated, she casually mentioned that my parents had recently fixed up my old room, just in case. Just in case of what? I hadn't lived there in years. They had no reason to suddenly decide to renovate it unless they were planning for me to move back. That same night, I reached out to an old neighbor. I kept the conversation light at first, just catching up, but when I mentioned my parents, there was a slight hesitation. Then, almost as if testing the waters, the neighbor said, "Something weird has been going on over there lately." Before I could ask what, they backtracked, saying they didn't want to get involved. Something was definitely wrong. Then my brother tried something new. Instead of guilt-tripping me, he sent a dramatic message about how our mother's health had been getting worse. He claimed she was struggling and that my absence was making things harder. That might have worked if I hadn't already been suspicious. Instead of believing him right away, I checked my mother's social media. She had posted that same day about going out shopping. There was even a picture of her with shopping bags, laughing. She wasn't sick, she wasn't struggling, he was lying. Then, as if this wasn't already spiraling out of control, a family friend called me, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. The conversation was strange, polite at first, then oddly insistent. He brought up how everyone would feel better if I moved back and how I could help fix things. When I asked what needed fixing, he dodged the question, instead saying it was about making things easier for everyone. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. So I made a counteroffer. I told my family I wasn't moving back, but I'd visit for a weekend to see them. That should have been good news, right? A compromise. Instead, the reaction was the opposite of what I expected. They were hesitant, uneasy, almost like I had disrupted something by saying that. My father barely responded. My mother suddenly acted like she didn't care whether I came or not, and my brother went silent for hours before sending a vague, "That's not really what we meant." Then, finally, my sister cracked. Late that night, she sent me a single message. "It's not about what they told you, it's about what they didn't." That was enough. I stopped waiting for them to tell me the truth and started searching for it myself. I went through public records, searching for anything tied to my parents. That's when I found it, a lawsuit. They were involved in some kind of legal battle. I couldn't access the full details yet, but it was big enough to have been filed in court. That wasn't even the worst part. Digging deeper, I checked my own records, something I should have done earlier, and there it was. A loan, a massive loan, taken out in my name. I had never signed anything, never agreed to anything, but somehow my name was on the paperwork. That was why they wanted me back. They had taken out a loan in my name, and they needed to keep me close before I found out, before I did anything about it. I didn't tell them what I knew. Instead, I hired a lawyer, quietly. If they stole from me once, what else were they planning? And what would have happened if I had actually moved back? The lawyer didn't take long to confirm what I had already suspected. The loan in my name was fraudulent. The signatures were forged, and the paperwork was riddled with inconsistencies. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Digging deeper, the lawyer discovered that my parents had been using my social security number for years. They had opened multiple lines of credit under my name, taking out small amounts here and there, likely to avoid triggering any major red flags. It had been going on for so long that by the time I noticed anything, they had already racked up a significant amount of debt. The lawyer explained my options. I could file a police report immediately and start the process of clearing my name, but that would mean officially turning against my family. If I waited too long, though, they could do even more damage. I told him I needed time to think, but in reality, I had already made up my mind. Then, right on cue, my father tried a new tactic. He suddenly claimed he was having heart problems. I knew by now that this was another manipulation attempt, especially since he had been perfectly fine just days earlier. He sent messages about how his health was declining, how the stress of the family situation was literally killing him. He made sure to mention how much it would mean to have me home, how everything would be better if I just came back. Instead of reacting, I had a cousin check in, a simple visit, nothing dramatic. The response came back quickly. My father was perfectly fine, no heart issues, no emergency, just another lie. At this point, I started gathering every piece of evidence I could, every text, every voicemail, every suspicious message. I wanted everything documented in case I needed legal protection. Then I decided to push a little. I called my parents, keeping the conversation light, and casually mentioned looking into my financial records. The reaction was immediate. My mother's tone shifted from concern to defensive in seconds. She told me to let the past stay in the past and that some things don't need to be dug up. She kept talking over me, trying to steer the conversation away. That told me everything I needed to know. The next mistake came from my brother. Unlike my parents, he didn't realize how much I had already figured out. In a moment of frustration, he let something slip. He told me they were just trying to fix things and that they had no choice. He backtracked immediately, but the damage was done. He had just admitted that they knew exactly what they were doing. I relayed everything to my lawyer, who strongly advised me to file a police report before more damage could be done. He also suggested contacting my bank directly. When I did, I got the final confirmation this wasn't a one-time thing. The fraudulent loans had been taken out over several years. Some were paid off before they could be noticed, while others had ballooned into major debt. This wasn't an accident, this was a long-term scheme. Everything made sense now. The sudden warmth from my family, the guilt-tripping, the job offer, the desperate attempts to get me home. It was all a ploy. They had been stealing from me for years, but now that I had started looking into my finances, they were desperate to get me back before I could expose their full scheme. Instead of confronting them, I decided to test them. I told them I was considering moving back. I played along, pretending to weigh my options. Then I set a trap. I told them I could move in 3 months. 5 minutes later, my father called. The same man who had supposedly been too sick to function was suddenly full of energy, insisting that I needed to come next week, not next month, not even in a few weeks, next week. That was the final confirmation. They weren't worried about family, they were worried about time. I didn't answer any more of their calls. Instead, I finalized everything with my lawyer. The legal process had begun, and with that, I realized the truth. To them, I wasn't a son, I wasn't family, I was a financial asset, and they would stop at nothing to keep control. The knock on my door came earlier than expected. No warning, no heads up, just the sound of someone pounding on it, loud and insistent. I checked the peephole and immediately tensed. My parents were standing outside my apartment. They hadn't told me they were coming. They had driven 2 hours unannounced just to talk. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. My father stood stiffly, scanning my face like he was trying to read me. My mother, standing just behind him, looked more frantic, her eyes red, her hands wringing together. I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me, making it clear that I wasn't letting them in. My father spoke first, his tone carefully measured. He started off calm, saying they just wanted to clear up any misunderstandings. I didn't say anything, I just let him talk. It didn't take long before he started carefully poking around, trying to gauge how much I knew. He asked vague questions about my job, my plans, whether I'd thought more about moving back. The way he was watching me, it wasn't casual conversation, it was an interrogation. My mother suddenly cut in, her voice shaking. She started talking about how they had always done everything for the family, how sometimes you have to make hard choices to keep things together. She never actually admitted anything, but she wasn't exactly denying either. The way she was speaking, it was like she thought I already knew everything. My brother and sister were standing a few feet behind them. My brother looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, avoiding eye contact. My sister wouldn't even lift her head. That was all the confirmation I needed. They knew, they had known this entire time. I decided to test them. I pretended to be considering moving back. I kept my voice neutral, mentioning that I had been thinking about it. The shift in their demeanor was instant. My father's stiff posture relaxed. My mother let out a breath like she had been holding it for hours. Then, almost immediately, the pressure started again. My father wanted me to move within the week. My mother started talking about how they had set things up for me already. When I asked what that meant, she brushed it off, saying everything was taken care of. Then came the part that really set off alarm bells. My mother, still sniffling, mentioned that I needed to sign a few documents before moving back. Just basic paperwork to make things easier. I asked to see them. She hesitated. My father shot her a quick look before stepping in and saying they had left them at home. Convenient. I told them I couldn't move that quickly. I had work commitments, loose ends to tie up. That was when my father's tone shifted again, his patience thin. He started talking about how refusing to come home was making things more difficult and how family was supposed to trust each other. He didn't raise his voice, but there was an edge to it, like he was warning me. So I pushed back. I told them I was planning to quit my job soon and would visit home to figure things out. That was a lie, but I needed to see how they would react. It worked. My mother let out a shaky laugh, nodding rapidly like everything was finally falling into place. My father looked satisfied. They bought it. Once they left, I called my lawyer immediately. He told me under no circumstances should I sign anything they gave me. He was almost certain they were trying to tie me into something legally, probably more financial fraud. Then things got worse. I checked my credit score that night. It had dropped significantly. Confused, I went through my credit report. Someone had maxed out multiple credit cards under my name. I hadn't even known those accounts existed. They were still using me, even as they were standing in my apartment, pretending to be concerned parents. They were actively draining my finances. That was the breaking point. There was no saving this, no second chances. They weren't desperate parents who made a mistake. They were liars, thieves, and the only thing they cared about was what they could take from me. I called my lawyer again. We were done waiting. It was time to take legal action. 2 days of silence. After weeks of constant calls, messages, and guilt-tripping, my family suddenly went quiet. No missed calls from my mother, no passive-aggressive texts from my brother, nothing. It felt like the calm before a storm. Then things started happening. My bank accounts began acting strange, small delays in transactions, failed login attempts, and then a freeze on one of my credit cards. When I called the bank, they told me someone had tried to access my account multiple times, triggering security measures. I called my lawyer immediately. That was when he hit me with something worse. My parents had attempted to file paperwork to gain financial control over me, citing concerns about my ability to manage money. However, without medical proof or my consent, their request was quickly denied. They were trying to take full legal control of everything I owned. The paperwork had been denied, but my lawyer warned me this was only the beginning. If they were willing to go this far, they wouldn't stop now. Then the smear campaign started. My sister, who had been mostly quiet, suddenly became active on social media, posting vague messages about family betrayal and how some people turned their backs on those who raised them. She didn't mention me directly, but I knew who it was aimed at. A few relatives joined in, liking and commenting, making it clear they had been fed whatever story my parents were spinning. It didn't stop there. My old employer reached out, confused. My parents had contacted them, asking if they would rehire me, acting as if I was suddenly jobless and in need of help. When my former boss asked if everything was okay, I assured him that I had no idea what they were talking about. Then came the voicemail. My mother's voice was thick with fake concern, pleading for me to call her back. She claimed they were worried about my well-being and just wanted to help. It was the same tone she had used before, but now I knew what it really meant. She wasn't worried about me, she was worried about losing control over me. The next part caught me off guard. 2 police officers showed up at my apartment. They had received a welfare check request. According to the report, my parents claimed I had been acting erratic and might be a danger to myself. I kept calm. My lawyer had already warned me this could happen, so I had documentation prepared. I explained everything, handed over legal records proving what was going on, and gave them my lawyer's contact information. They asked a few standard questions and, seeing that everything was fine, left without further issue. That could have gone a lot worse. After that, my lawyer took immediate action. He began freezing any accounts my parents had access to and securing my financial records. The process wasn't instant, but with every step, I was cutting off their reach. Then we moved to the next phase. I officially filed fraud charges against them. The moment that paperwork went through, the floodgates opened. My mother called over and over. leaving voicemails that switched between crying, pleading, and trying to convince me to just talk before things got worse. My father sent a single final message, short, cold, and to the point, "You don't know what you're doing." I blocked them both. I blocked my brother too. The only person I didn't block yet was my sister, but even after blocking their numbers, they started reaching out through different phone numbers, unknown caller IDs, and even fake social media accounts. She hadn't been involved in the fraud directly, but she had known about it. She had stayed silent. I wasn't sure where she stood, but for now I kept the line open. But one thing was clear. If they were willing to go as far as filing false reports, what would they try next? The silence from my family didn't last long. A few days after I cut off my parents and brother, my sister finally reached out. Her message was short. She wanted to talk in person. I met her at a coffee shop far from my apartment. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. The moment we sat down, she blurted it out. Our parents' business was failing. It had been for years. They had taken loans under my name to keep it afloat, not just one or two, but multiple. At first, it was small amounts, just enough to cover shortfalls. Then, as things got worse, the loans got bigger. My name had become their safety net, a way to borrow money without risking their own credit. She hesitated before adding something worse. My brother had been involved too. He hadn't just known about it, he had helped forge documents. That explained everything, the pressure to move back, the sudden warmth, the urgency. One of the fraudulent loans was under investigation. They needed me back so they could convince the bank I had willingly taken it out. If I had signed anything when they asked, it would have locked me into the debt permanently. She was terrified. She wanted out but didn't know how. Our parents still controlled everything in her life, and she was scared of what they would do if she left. I told my lawyer everything. His response was immediate. If I wanted to protect myself, I needed to file the lawsuit now. The longer I waited, the more damage they could do. So I did it. The lawsuit was officially filed, blocking them from accessing any more of my finances. That's when things exploded. My father left a voicemail, furious, screaming about how I was ruining everything. My mother took to social media, posting dramatic messages about betrayal, about how some people forget where they come from. Extended family members started sending messages, accusing me of turning on my own parents. Then the story changed. My parents started telling everyone that I was the one who had stolen money, that I had secretly taken out loans and was blaming them to cover it up. Some relatives believed them, others stayed quiet. Then I got an unexpected call from a distant aunt. She hadn't been involved in the chaos before, but she had seen my mother's social media posts and decided to reach out. She told me this wasn't the first time my parents had been caught up in shady financial dealings. Years ago, they had borrowed money from another family member and never paid it back. There had been rumors, but nothing had ever come of it until now. And then, just as suddenly as he had been pushing me to return, my brother vanished. No calls, no texts. At first, he kept pushing me to move back, but once the lawsuit was filed, he stopped contacting me. I suspected he was either trying to avoid legal consequences or working on his own defense. That raised a new suspicion. Was he trying to avoid legal consequences, or was he planning something else? Meanwhile, my sister made a decision. She wanted out. She asked if she could stay with me, no longer trusting our parents. I agreed. I wasn't going to leave her stuck in their mess. Then the final warning came, an anonymous voicemail, no name, no details, just a low voice saying, "Watch your back. They're not done yet." Fraud, manipulation, false reports, it had all failed, but what would they try next? The first anonymous message came late at night, just a single text that read, "Drop the case while you still can." I ignored it. The second one came the next morning, "You're making a mistake." Then the call started, no caller ID. The first time, I let it go to voicemail, nothing but heavy breathing on the other end. The second time, I picked up. A low voice said, "Walk away, or you'll regret it." Then the line went dead. I reported it to my lawyer, who advised me to document everything. We both knew who was behind it, but without proof, there was nothing to be done. Then something worse happened. One morning, I went outside to find my car sitting lower than usual. All 4 tires had been slashed. At first, I thought it was just vandalism, until I had it towed to a mechanic. After checking under the hood, he gave me a grim look and said, "Your brake lines were cut." Whoever did it wasn't just trying to intimidate me. They wanted to cause real damage. I filed a police report immediately. The officer took my statement, but without cameras or witnesses, there wasn't much they could do. He told me to be careful and suggested installing security cameras at my apartment. That was the next step. I installed cameras outside my door and in my parking space. I changed my locks. My lawyer warned me to be extra cautious, especially after we received confirmation that someone had attempted to access my bank accounts again. Even after everything, they were still trying to steal from me. Then my father showed up at my apartment. I hadn't spoken to him since I blocked him, but there he was, standing outside my door, knocking hard. I didn't answer. The knocking turned into pounding. I opened the door just enough to step outside, making sure he couldn't push past me. His face was red with anger. He demanded I fix this before it was too late. He kept saying I was making things worse for everyone, that I was being dramatic, that family handles things privately. Then he made a mistake. In the middle of his rant, he slipped. He said something about how my brother only did what was necessary to keep things running. I didn't react, but I caught it. He had just admitted my brother had been the one handling the fake documents. After he left, I told my sister. She finally broke down and confirmed it. My brother had been the one forging paperwork for years. He knew exactly what he was doing. Then the messages from extended family started coming in. They called me selfish, ungrateful, cruel. They claimed I was destroying the family over some money. That same night, my parents invited me to a family dinner. They wanted to talk things through. My lawyer immediately told me not to go. It was too risky. If they got me alone, they could try to manipulate me into signing something or worse. I declined. Then a childhood friend from my hometown called. He had heard what was happening through mutual friends. Your family is spreading some crazy stories about you, he warned. They're making you out to be some greedy villain. Be careful. The next morning, my lawyer told me we had enough grounds to discuss filing a restraining order against my parents and brother. They weren't just emotionally manipulating me anymore. They had sabotaged my car, continued accessing my finances, and sent anonymous threats. That night, at 2 a.m., my phone buzzed, a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was broken, desperate, shaking with sobs. Please, please, just drop this. We only did what we had to do. We had no other choice. Please don't do this to us. By the time the sun rose, my lawyer had a new update. Formal fraud charges were imminent. And now, with everything they'd already done, one thought kept circling in my mind. If they were willing to sabotage my car, what else would they do to stop me? The fraud case was now officially public. The lawsuit had been filed, and a court date was set. There was no going back. My parents could no longer sweep this under the rug or try to handle it within the family. That was when everything started falling apart for them. A source, someone who still lived in my hometown and had connections, reached out to me. He told me my parents' business was in far worse shape than they had let on. The debts they had racked up were unmanageable. They had been using me as their last-ditch effort to save themselves, and now that I had cut them off, their financial collapse was inevitable. My brother, who had been defensive before, completely stopped reaching out. No texts, no calls, nothing. My lawyer suspected he was negotiating a deal for himself, trying to throw my parents under the bus to protect himself legally. Then things took a turn. The police contacted me. They had received a harassment complaint against me, filed by my own father. According to the claim, I had been stalking and threatening my family, making their lives unsafe. It was an outright lie. I hadn't seen them in person since my father showed up at my apartment. My lawyer acted fast, countering the false accusation with a defamation lawsuit against my father. If they wanted to play dirty, we were ready. That was when my extended family started backing away. Some of my aunts and uncles who had originally sided with my parents began distancing themselves after learning about the fraud. Maybe they had believed my parents at first, but now that everything was going public, they wanted nothing to do with it. Then I got a cryptic message from my sister. I cannot take this anymore. I am leaving. She refused to disclose where she was going. I didn't push. If she was trying to escape them, I wasn't going to do anything to put her at risk. But then my lawyer delivered the final blow. He had hired a private investigator just to make sure my parents weren't trying anything new. What they found was worse than I expected. Even after the fraud case had been filed, my parents had attempted to use stolen personal information to apply for another credit line. However, since I had already alerted my bank and placed fraud alerts on my accounts, their attempt was flagged and blocked before any damage was done. That was enough to get a restraining order approved. My parents and my brother were now legally prohibited from contacting me, coming near me, or interfering in my life in any way. And that's when my mother had her public meltdown. She went online, posting dramatic social media messages about how a mother's love was being punished, about how certain children forget the sacrifices their parents make, about how money had poisoned family values. Then the last message came. My father left one final voicemail, his voice filled with rage. You will regret this. Mark my words. I blocked every single family member involved. No more warnings, no more chances. Then my lawyer confirmed it. My brother was trying to negotiate a plea deal. He was shifting all the blame onto our parents. Now, with overwhelming evidence, my lawyer assured me of one thing: my parents were about to face severe legal and financial consequences. And with the court date approaching, I realized this was only the beginning. After months of legal proceedings, the court date finally arrived. My parents and brother walked into the courtroom looking drained. Their confidence from months ago completely gone. There were no fake smiles, no attempts to guilt me with sad looks. They already knew they had lost. The judge reviewed the evidence: bank statements, forged documents, fraudulent loans. Every piece of proof laid out in front of them made it impossible to deny what they had done. My lawyer had done his job well. My father was the first to speak, trying to deflect blame. He insisted he did not know what was happening, and pointed fingers at my brother, claiming he was the one who had handled the financial matters. But it didn't work. There were signed documents with my father's handwriting, emails confirming his involvement, and clear proof that he had been in on it from the start. Then my brother's deal was confirmed. As expected, he had agreed to testify against our parents in exchange for a lesser sentence. He claimed they had pressured him into forging the documents, making it seem like he had no choice. But that defense fell apart quickly. His emails, signatures, and financial activity showed he had been just as complicit. He wasn't a victim, he was a full participant. When the sentencing was announced, the judge made it clear this was not a misunderstanding, not a simple financial mistake. It was deliberate fraud. My parents were ordered to repay the fraudulent loans on top of heavy fines. My brother received probation with financial penalties, plus a criminal record. Then my sister did something unexpected. She had refused to speak to our parents for weeks, but at the last moment she submitted a formal statement about the years of manipulation and financial abuse they had put us through. She detailed how they had always controlled us, how they saw us as tools instead of children. My mother finally broke down in court. She sobbed, saying she was just a helpless mother who only wanted to protect her family. She begged for mercy, for a lighter punishment. But the judge didn't buy it. You did not act as a helpless mother, you acted with intent. Actions have consequences. No sympathy, no reduced penalties. The full weight of their actions fell on them. Outside of court, the fallout was brutal. Word spread quickly in their town. Their neighbors, their friends, even the few extended relatives who still sided with them. Everyone knew what they had done. Their business had already been failing, and now, with their reputation destroyed, there was no way they could recover. Then came the last desperate plea: an email, a new account, no name, but I recognized the writing immediately. It was my mother. She begged for money, claimed they had nothing left, and pleaded for me to not abandon them. I deleted it without responding. Meanwhile, my brother's life fell apart. His employer found out about the fraud case, and he lost his job. With a criminal record and debts to pay, his future was ruined, entirely by his own doing. My sister finally got out. She moved to a new city far away, cutting off all contact with our parents. For the first time in her life, she was free, and so was I. I relocated, changed my number, and completely erased them from my life. No more fear of what they would try next. No more worrying about stolen finances, manipulation, or threats. I didn't forgive them. I never would. But for the first time, I felt free. They had wanted me back for support, but all they truly wanted was control. Now they had lost everything, and I had finally won.